My mum told me this story from her time at a neuropsychotic ward while she was in grad school. She was making her routine room checks and stumbled upon the most horrific scene I've ever heard. This was during the night shift, and generally, all the patients' bedroom doors should be closed. So my mum turned a corner and noticed an open door. She saw a staff member's legs on the floor, halfway out the doorway. When she looked into the room, she saw the patient, a woman with a severe postpartum psychiatric disorder, who had just gouged both of her own eyes out with her bare hands. She was sitting, cross-legged on the floor, holding her eyes in her hands. The first staff member to witness the scene, who was now lying face down on the floor, had a heart attack when he first witnessed the woman while he was making his rounds. My mum screamed for help and frantically tried to perform CPR on a staff member. All the while, the woman just sat rather calmly, holding her own eyes. We had a young lady in our custody with quite a few issues. We'll call her Jane. Jane's first night at our facility, staff were doing a bed check and found Jane in a puddle of blood. Turns out, Jane had been slicing the skin around her shin with her fingernails and was pulling her skin up her leg, essentially degloving her calf. Jane also had a ritual she performed every night before bed. While in her room, she would run between walls in her room, touching them in a crucifix pattern. After doing this for a few hours, she would sit on her bed and go to sleep. This particular night, Jane was frantic in her pace, practically running between walls. Our night, staff observed the entire interaction and reported Jane screaming late into the night. When the staff went to check on Jane, they reported Jane was standing in the doorway, smiling. The staff asked what was wrong, and Jane replied, "What makes you think you're speaking to Jane?" Once, a fellow female patient told me she found writings under her bed. They were just old, small wooden bed frames with hard mattresses that would make all kinds of noise when you rolled over. But I still wondered what exactly she was doing, lying under a bed to find these writings. When she first told me, I thought it was a joke, but sure enough, one day, during grouping, we managed to sneak away, and she showed me. Indeed, there were stories written under her bed. After that, we had everyone check under their own beds, and there was more writing under every single bed. There were stories of patients who had stayed here before, or ways they were planning on killing themselves, or who the good and bad nurses were. It really creeped me out. I had an hour-long conversation with a delusional guy who was confined to a mental health facility, and who was probably smarter than I am. Lots of these folks believe that somebody, often the CIA, is either beaming thoughts into their heads or has implanted a microchip in their brains for this purpose. This guy was offering a very thoughtful argument as to why such claims should not be quickly dismissed. It's precisely because such delusions are so common that mental patients make the best test subjects, he said. There he was, confined and protected, constantly observed, his health and behaviour documented, and there is zero chance that anyone would ever take his concerns seriously. How else would you test and improve such technology? Did the government not have a strong motivation and a plausible ability to create such a device? You can see I'm not irrational, the man said. I'm just straight up telling you that they are doing this to me. I know just how unbelievable it sounds, but yet, here I am. As a tech in psych years ago, there was a 7-year-old kid sent to the floor because the mum didn't know what to do with him. Sadly, it's a common thing to happen, even if the kids don't have psych issues. Anyway, the mum was shaking and crying, and they had to take the kid into another room. She was genuinely afraid of her own son. She had suspected something was wrong when she kept finding mutilated animals in the backyard, but never heard or saw coyotes or anything around. The neighbours' smaller pets started disappearing. The boy had an obsession with knives, hiding them around the house, denying anything when Mum confronted him. Then, when the two started getting into arguments, he would get really violent and hit her, push her down, and kick her, or threaten to kill her. On multiple occasions, she woke up in the middle of the night with him standing beside her bed, staring her directly in the face. She put extra locks on her bedroom door to feel safe while she slept. The last straw was when she lifted up his mattress and found 50 plus knives of all shapes and sizes under there, so she brought him to us. I remember talking to him, treating him like he was just any other kid that came through. He seemed remarkably normal, until you spoke directly to him. He had this way of looking right through you, or maybe like he didn't see you at all while you were speaking. He would respond like a robot, like he was just saying words because that's what we wanted to hear. And he was always put on this creepy, dead-looking smile, like all mouth and no eye involvement in the smile. Especially when he would get away with something, like taking another kid's markers and they couldn't figure it out. It still gives me chills laying here thinking about him, because I believe I met a 7-year-old psychopath.